Last time I was in this theater, there were about 2,000 16-year-old kids putting on plays at the time. It was so much fun. This is a great place to talk. Really artsy place, too. So I hope you're all having a lot of fun. Usually during the week about this time, I'm starting to wrap up my weekly iterations of different code that I write. And the teams that I've been on, usually around Friday, about 4 o'clock, want to start getting out of there. You test your code, things are working on your machine, and then all of a sudden, you just leave, right? Because it goes through CI, and CI is magical and fixes everything, and it just works everywhere. But sometimes, and this has happened to me, and it might have happened to you, you deploy your app, or someone deploys your app if you're a larger company, and then you get a phone call. Yeah, things aren't working so good. And what do you say? Works on my machine, right? I'm in beach mode. I live in Florida. I'm not going back to work on a weekend, right? So this is one of the problems that we have in development. And luckily, there's solutions to some of these problems. Even when you're building front-end frameworks with JavaScript, there's a lot of things we have to do to make sure it doesn't just work on my machine, but it works everywhere. So part of the problem we're trying to do is we want to solve the issue where we want to have confidence that our apps are going to work locally on our machines and in any environment that we put them into. Because if they work anywhere, then you can go home and not worry about those kinds of phone calls. You don't want to worry about all the different things that could possibly go wrong. So today, I want to talk about how we can do that with Node and Vue applications. So first, when we do have problems, because we all have problems occasionally, we want to be able to debug our applications. So learning how to use the tools to properly debug our apps is really important. And we've got some great tools to do this. We've got the Chrome debugger, we've got the Vue dev tools, we've got VS Code, so many great things. So we'll take a look at things that we can do there, and then how can we package up our applications? Take all the different pieces of our application and put them in a box, basically, and then run them. And then run it in the cloud, any cloud you like. You can package it up, push it to a cloud, and really feel confident it's just going to work. So first, let's start with thinking about how we fix the bugs in our application. I know, you don't write bugs, right? But I do. And when I have bugs, I need to know that I can jump in and fix things right away. Well, there's a couple ways to do this. There's the good old console log, right? And there is no shame in console log. It works. It works. It's perfectly fine, but it does require you to have to recompile sometimes or rebuild and go through the dev process. Even if it's only 10 seconds or 20 seconds, that is time that you're constantly changing things. If you don't like console logs, you can have fun with it. If you're into Star Trek, you can create Captain's Log. Yes, I have a lot of time on my hands. So good debugging tools are really essential to a good experience so we can focus on correcting our code. We don't want to have to worry about, now I got to set up the debugger. I remember back in the early days of Node trying to set up Node debugging. Ooh, it was not fun. But today, luckily, we don't have to worry about these kinds of things. So we're going to look at how we can debug Vue code in VS Code as well. We can debug right inside of VS Code with our Vue applications. So we can crank up the debugger, run the application, set breakpoints in our Vue code, inspect things, change values, rebuild. Basically connecting Chrome to VS Code directly. Very, very nice. We can also do it directly inside of the browser, as we all know. We can launch the debugger, set breakpoints. There's a lot of cool features we'll take a look at. We can run Node for our Node applications in the server inside VS Code and debug from there as well, simply by pressing the F5 key or through a couple other techniques that we'll look at. So we'll start the debugger up, set breakpoints. You can do inline breakpoints if you're using asynchronous programming. Super cool. Inspect and change values, and there's a couple bonus things in there which I find really helpful. So let's go ahead and jump in. In the first demo, we're going to debug our Node app and our Vue app inside of VS Code. So first, let's take a look at the app that we have running. And I've got a version of it up on the cloud. The app is called Tour of Heroes because everybody needs heroes in their life. And you can tell that I watch Vikings on TV. And people have been hitting my database because it is live. So here's the Heroes application, and we've got heroes, we've got villains, And we've got an about page with a bunch of links on it where you can find the source code and instructions on how to run this. If I want to debug this app, part of what I need to do is have VS Code open with my Node application and with my Vue app inside of it. Let's take a look at what's in there first. So over in the left-hand side, you can see I've got my code, and I've got a server folder and a source folder. How you organize this is up to you. I decided to put my client in one folder and my server in another. So here's my Vue application with all my views. And then I've got a server folder which has got my routes, my Express server which is running, which is over there. And then it's got some services which are hitting a database, going off and talking to Cosmos DB in the cloud. So that's my application. But if I want to debug this and run it, a couple things I need to do first. First, I want to run inside of my package.json. I can run Vue serve, but if I run Vue serve, the problem is it's just running Vue. It's not hitting my Node app. I need my Node app to run too. So I've got another command here called dev proxy. You can call it John if you like. What a great name. And you can use concurrently to say, you know what, run local debugging. Local debug runs my Node app. It's running server.js. And it's also going to run my Vue app. And then I'm using the proxy config inside of the Vue config.js to connect the two. So we're going to run that command using a nice shortcut, Command-Shift-P up in Visual Studio Code. We'll run a script. We're going to select dev proxy. And then it's going to build my application down below in the terminal. First, it's cranking up Node, which takes just a moment. And then it's going to build with Webpack my Vue application. And then once that's ready, I can hit the browser and go over and listen to or browse to my port to look at my application. So if I come back to Chrome, that's a cached version of it, but we'll check. OK, now it's running on port 9001. We'll refresh, and there's my application. And as we know, we can open up the application. We can go over to sources. We can zoom in on our sources. We can set breakpoints. Looks like I've got one here on selecting a hero. I'll select John. There it is right inside of Chrome. But what if I wanted to debug right here inside of VS Code? Well, a couple things to look at. One is there's this launch.json file. Launch.json is something that VS Code gives us to set up these launch configurations. What does that mean? It means that we can set up debugging between VS Code and any target that we want. In this case, the target is Vue inside the Chrome browser. And all we need to do is install the Chrome debugging extension for VS Code to make this work. And then you can see the configuration here. Now, if lines 26 or 7 get confusing to you, you can find those both in the VS Code docs online and the Vue docs online. So both places have the configuration. That's really the special sauce that makes it work, and that maps the source path, the source maps to your code. So how does this work now? I can go to the debug pane over here on the left by hitting this little bug, and then I can select my configuration from the upper part, which is right there. I'm going to choose Vue Chrome. And then all I have to do is press Run. It's going to open up Chrome right there for me. And now, if I've got any breakpoints, which I believe I do right there, let's see what the breakpoint is on. The breakpoint is on Get Heroes. So if I hit this refresh button, boom. I'm now pausing. Notice it says Pause in Visual Studio Code. I'm debugging my code right here. And I can just walk through it. I can inspect values. I can let it run. I've also got one on select here, so let me select this one. And you can observe what's inside a hero. You can use the debug console to change the values, inspect them, do a whole bunch of things. But it's really nice for an integrated experience. So now that we have that running here, what if we wanted to have it running in both Node debugging and Vue debugging inside of VS Code? So let's try this. This is one of my favorite things. Down below, I've got both Node and Vue running. And you'll notice if I go to Settings in VS Code, which I hit Command, comma to get there, and I type in Auto Attach, there's this wonderful feature called Debug Node Auto Attach. And it is turned off. If I turn this on, then next time it sees the Node process with the debugging port open, it will automatically attach the Node debugger. Well, let's cancel everything for a moment, and we'll cancel this process. And let's go back and run the dev proxy again, now that I have auto attach turned on. And you'll notice that the debugging pane already popped up, it saw that I had a Node app running. But let's wait for the Vue app to build, and we'll see what happens next. So once this app is out there, we're then going to connect our Vue Chrome debugger, right like this. And then the debugging pane has this little drop-down. It's both attached to Node and to Chrome at the same time. This is really cool. So now, inside my app, if I show the application on the right and then the debugging on the left, we can see it stopped at a breakpoint. Let's let it run for a moment, and just to kind of get an idea of what it's doing over here. I'm in Node code on the top. Let's also open up my Heroes view, and I'll bring that down to the bottom. So the top is Node code, the bottom is Heroes. Notice the breakpoints on the top are red, on the bottom they're gray with circles that are hollow. That means that right now my debugger is using auto-attached, which is Node, so those ones are enabled. As soon as it goes over to using Vue, if I click on this one, it's using the Vue ones. Does that mean I can't use both at the same time? Not exactly. Notice the breakpoint here is on Get Heroes, and it's on Get Heroes down there. So let's go ahead and hit the refresh button. And notice it's hitting the Vue code first. So I can walk through my Vue code, let it run, and then it hits the Node code right after that. So now we're doing full stack debugging from Chrome in VS Code to Vue, right down to the Node server, all at the same time. And don't forget to disconnect twice. Otherwise, you'll still be running it there. So the thing I love about that is it just makes debugging so much easier, and setting up these configurations is easy. Notice that we had a configuration to set up to debug Vue from VS Code. Just a couple lines of code, and it knows how to connect to Chrome. With Node, we didn't have to do anything except turn auto-attach on, and it automatically attaches the debugger for us. Now, I like to keep auto-attach off because most of the time I'm coding, I don't want to debug, but when I do turn it on, then it automatically will attach for me. So we just talked about how we can debug front and back end apps, and I'll make these slides available. Inside these slides, there's animated GIFs that show you exactly what I just did, so you can follow the same steps. Also in the GitHub README that I'll be sharing, you can see a link that shows you how to do all this stuff too with the instructions. And if you want easy debugging with zero config, all you have to do is go to Settings, and then you turn on Auto Attach, and then just start your app. It can't get any easier than that. Just turn it on and go. One of the nice things that I didn't show in here, but you might have seen a little diamond. It wasn't like I was playing solitaire or something in my app. There's not just circles and diamonds. The circles are regular breakpoints. The diamonds are log points. Have you ever been in an app and you wanted to make a code change to check something, console log? Again, we all do it, there's no shame. You want to put a console log in there, but you don't want to have to rebuild your app to do it. You just want to inspect a certain value out to your output. Well, what you can do is set up a log point. With a log point, all you do is you right-click, you say create a log point, and then you could do something like I'm showing here, where I'm saying heroes are, and then inside of the curly braces, put the value of which you want to output. It does not modify your code, but instead VS Code will inspect those values and put them right in the output of your terminal for you. So you can look at the information without rebuilding or doing anything else. Very, very cool, no code changes at all. All right, so once we've debugged our code and things are running, we have to worry about packaging and deploying all of our things. I'm very technical. You take all your things and you put them in a box and you ship them. Those things, what are they? Well, people always tell me, why is it so hard to deploy apps? Well, at a lot of companies, you've got more than just one thing. You've got a lot of things. Because normally what we just do is you run serve, and it builds up our Vue app. And then we can also run the Node server, and it builds our Node app. Of course, you have to connect those through a proxy or through cores or something else. Maybe we can do that. That's not so bad. But what makes it so difficult? We've got environment variables. Maybe it runs one way on my machine, but it's a different database on someone else's machine in a staging environment or testing environment. What about those secrets? Do you check in your database secrets? Some guy over there is saying yes. Great. I've done it. Then you have to go scan through GitHub and get rid of them and change your secrets. So you want to get these things where you've got all these different pieces, secrets, front-end code, back-end code, database connectivity, connection strings. Maybe you're hitting more than one app, serverless functions, URLs. What OS are you running on? Mac, Windows, Linux? What version? What version of Node do you have? What version of NPM are you running? All of these things, if any one of them is out of whack, can cause your app that works on your machine to not work on your machine or your machine. Any one of those. You might say, hey, not my problem, that's CI's problem. Well, we can make it easy for everybody. That's the good thing. What do we normally do when we build and package apps? Let's think about this. First, we know what's in our app. We really take an inventory of what's in our app, what makes that application. And we make a list. Have you ever started at a new company and they're like, all right, I got to run this app and I can't get it to run. And you go ask your buddy. And then she says, okay, here's an email with all the things you have to do. First, use this version of Node, then use that version of NPM, then run this command here, and then do that. Right? It's a list. We all do it. And then they share it. She sends you the email. Great, you're up and running. And then you follow the steps. Guess what you just did? You did everything that you need to do to create a Dockerfile. That list of what you create to say, how do I run my app? You can take that same list, instead of putting it in an email, put it in a Dockerfile, and it just tells you the recipe and the steps to run your application. So it runs no matter where you are. And a Dockerfile is very simply just a self-contained script. It's very short, and it sets up your environment for what you're going to run. It provides that recipe for running your app, and then you can configure it to adapt to different environments. You might say, well, yeah, but I don't want it to run the same way in different places. Well, it's nice because you can effectively poke holes in the container and pass values in, environment variables, to say, you know what, on my machine, I want you to hit this database and this URL. But when you go to the cloud, hit that database and that URL. Run on a different port. Let's take a look at a demo of how we could run our app in Docker. So we've got this same app, and I'm going to kill the app down below. And I've got this Docker file. Let's bring it up to full screen. There we go. So here's my grocery list. I've said that, look, when I run this app, it's got to run with Node. I want this version of Node. And then I create a working directory. And I bring over my package JSON. That is my manifest for my Node app and my Vue app. And then I run npm install, copy all the files. I have an environment variable for Vue. And then I run the build. It's a production build for Vue. This whole thing, from lines 1 through 10, gets put into effectively a temporary variable called client app. This is called a multi-stage Dockerfile. So I've just said all that stuff from lines 1 through 10, put the contents of it on something called client app. Next, go build my Node server. Same version of Node. I've got a working directory, package JSON, npm install. I copy over all my server code, and then that gets put into a variable called Node server. That's stage 2. Now, the reason I put those in temporary variables is when you do npm installs, you get a lot of the development dependencies too. You get a lot of Node modules. We don't really want all that stuff on a production server. Even if they don't have access to it, why put them there? You just want your distribution folder. So then we have a final image. In the final image, I'm effectively taking the pieces that I just put together, Vue and Node, and I'm saying, go ahead, start up Alpine. Node Alpine's what I want with LTS. Copy over from the Node server everything in the source folder. Copy over everything from the Vue client application into the dist folder. So I'm just getting the Node server code, just getting the dist app, expose my port, and run Node server. That's it. That's it. Just setting these things up so you can run your application. If you want a couple of different options, there's actually 2 or 3 Dockerfile configurations up on the Vue documentation site as well. One for Nginx and one for running the Webpack dev server with the Vue CLI. So once you have your Dockerfile, all you have to do is learn about 5 million Docker CLI commands. I'll tell you, when I first learned Docker, that was like, I like CLI, but I'm like, I can't memorize this stuff. When something comes in my ear, something else falls out the other end, and it's starting to get to the point where I'm going to forget like my name or something. So Dockerfiles, how do you run these things? There's a really cool extension built into VS Code, and it's got the whale down here called the Docker extension. And when I click on that, you can see it's got images, containers, and registries. Images are basically your blueprints for what you're going to run. The containers are running instances of it. And a registry is kind of like, think of it like NPM, but for Docker containers. Where are you going to put it when you're done? So first, we want to create an image. I'm going to hit Command-Shift-P, the special command in VS Code to run anything, and I'm going to run Docker. You have to spell it right, by the way. It doesn't know what Docker is. It might think it's Dokken. It was a great old band when I grew up. Somebody remembers them? There we go. Docker compose up. So you got to compose yourself. I love the names we have in technology. And then once you compose yourself, you choose which YAML file you want to run. Oh no, YAML. We'll take a look at that in a moment. This is basically saying, do you want to run in debug mode or not? And the only difference I have in my debug mode, I'll show you this while it's running. So if I go show my debug panel, is that I also expose the debugging port 9229, which, if you're thinking ahead, means that I can debug my Docker container if I want to. When I go to production, I don't want that port exposed, so I have another YAML file that doesn't expose it. But this one does. So if we look down below, it's building up my application. It's running through the steps that we have. And you can see it labeled it. It's running npm install. And this will take however long your Wi-Fi and npm installs will take. And then when it's done, it'll create that image. We can go over here and look, so I've created it already in the past. And we can see an image right there called Heroes Vue Node API. That's my image. We can see I created one 4 hours ago. Yep, I tested my demo. And then you can see there's a container running. The second container is the instance that I ran a couple hours ago. And the green arrow basically shows that that is a running instance of that image. So there's my container. And I could run that. Now, just to make it a little less confusing, I already had an app running on port 9000. That was locally. When I run it in Docker, you'll notice one thing I did is I expose it here on 9000, but down here I'm mapping 9000 to 8000, just so I could run the Docker container and hit 8000. But when I run it locally, I hit 9000. That way I don't ever run into, hey, port is in use. Anyone ever see that error? Yeah. So that helps me avoid that. All right, and then once that's there, what you can do is you can simply go to your container and then run it. And if we go to our browser, we can see now I've got port 8000. And that's the instance that was running earlier. I'll refresh the browser. And there's the application running inside of the container that we have. Now, one of the things you might be wondering is, what about the environments? Like, how do you make it run anywhere? Well, I'm going to show you some of my keys, but I'm going to drag some stuff over so you can't see my database keys. You can see that I have this env file locally that I've git ignored and Docker ignored, and you can see that the file has my core API key and URL up there to hit my database. So locally, I'm using that. When I go to Docker, what I'm doing instead is I'm telling it to point to that file, grab those values in memory, and use it to run the Docker instance. But don't actually put those keys in the Docker image, because I don't want people having them. Because that would be bad. Giving people your keys, not a good idea. And that's still running. Slow Wi-Fi. All right. So once you have that up and running, what we can do is we can also debug our Docker container. All we have to do is go to our launch configuration again, and you'll notice I've got another one in here called attach Docker to node. The nice thing about this one is you don't have to remember this at all. If you hit this big blue button in the bottom right-hand corner, add configuration, one of the options is Docker attach to node, and it puts exactly what you're seeing on screen right there. So I click this button, I choose Docker attach to node, which I've already done, and it creates this right here. Now all I have to do to debug my Docker container is go to the debug panel, choose Docker attach to node right there, and then as long as the container is not halfway in building, it'll automatically connect to that container. So now if I go back to my app and I hit refresh right there, I'm debugging my Docker container right now. So now I'm debugging everything inside of the container and letting it run through. And let's say you're not really comfortable with Docker, because I wasn't when I first got into it. What you can do is you can right-click on the container, and you can choose one of these cool options, attach shell, then you can manipulate the files in it, or show logs. So if I attach the shell, and I hit ls, you can see inside the folders. I can look inside, hey, what's inside that dist folder? And there's my Vue application. What about Vue showing the logs? If I show the logs, you can see now the debugger is attached. And then notice it says heroes are, and it's outputting information. That was that log point here that was outputting every time we grab a hero. So you can see the logs every time you hit the data. And it looks like it may have built our application. Nope, it's close. It's close. Recreating it. I love when it gets to step 21 to 21. Like, that to me means 100%. Okay, now it's done. Cool. So we should be able to go back, and everything worked. I should be able to refresh, and the app is still there. Yay! That's always a good sign. So once you do that, though, how's it getting up to Azure or the cloud? And you could go to any cloud you want. I have a URL here called papa-vueconf 2019, azurewebsites.net. It really needs a nice custom domain. And what I've done is I've effectively gone to the image, and I said, all right, there's my image right there. I created it a few seconds ago. I right-click it, and I can do a couple options. I can push it, I can tag it, I can run it. What I'm going to do is tag it. Tagging it is a way for you to tell it where is it going to go. I want it to go to my registry for my Docker containers, which the URL is papacr.azurecr.io, John Papa. So I can tag it for it. And then after I tag it, it's just named and it's right there. Notice both of those are the same now, just have a different name. After you tag it, the next step is you can right-click it and you can push it. Pushing it will send it up to the cloud. And I'll say skip now. Let's see if it wants to remember my favorite. And notice it's preparing all those layers. And then sometimes you have to authenticate, which I think this is the command. Let's see if it can authenticate quick. Cool, good. And let's push again. This time I'll do it from the command up here. And I'll choose that image, tell it to skip. And notice down below, it's checking the layers. If it's super fast, that means that certain layers already existed. I must have made a code change somewhere to some of the layers, so push 2 of them. It redid the other layers, pushed it up, and then any changes I would have would automatically be seen up on the site that's running right here. So within about 10 seconds after you've built your container, you can push it up, and it automatically redeploys your container to the cloud. The great thing is, you might ask, what version of what OS and Node and NPM and all that are you running in the cloud? I don't know, I don't care. The Docker container handles it. The Docker container says, use this version of Node, this version of NPM, this version of all my packages and package.json, run it like that. And it puts that container in the cloud, and it just works. The good news is, all the stuff that I did here, you can do that too if you follow the GitHub README that I created for it all. So once it's in there in the app, again, you can see that it's just going to run your app inside of Docker. Vue and Node. Not bad. We can compose that image, and here's the steps we want to follow through. Compose up, we'll build it and run it. Then you'll see it right there. If you want to debug it, you can simply just run the container with the launch configuration, and then just set your breakpoints, and you're good to go. If you want to deploy the app, effectively what you're doing is you're installing the dependencies, the Vue assets, the Express server, and pushing it to the cloud, and not worrying about Node versions or other versions getting out of sync. Then when you deploy your app, again, we build the image, tag it, push it, and then I put the demo, which we just went through, and I put the steps in here after this and how you can do that. So the key to all this is, once you've composed and tagged, and then you've debugged it if you'd like to, and then you've pushed it to the cloud of your choice, you can make changes inside your Docker container, debug it right on your machine, and then send it up to the cloud anytime you want, and within like 10, 15 seconds, you've got a dev debug cycle in the cloud itself, without worrying about what's running. And if you want to run this app, you can go up to the URL that you'll find on the next slide, and you can run this application and try it out. All the links you'll find up in the GitHub repo. The link on your left is what's going to give you all the instructions for the README and everything you need to run it. Of course, you can look at the code and do what you want with it as well. But hopefully, if you follow through all this, using Vue and Node apps, you can run those things anywhere you want. So I hope you had a good time, and I appreciate you coming to this great conference. Thank you.